Tātai Makwesha Narrapia Þoïe. I'm a linguist and fox-person thief from the kingdom of Foithiqøi. I study linguistics at the Foithiqøi, but I'm keen to do some proper adventuring, and have been interested in going to the east to learn this language called XIÐIO. Apparently no one has ever properly studied it, so I'll be the first. But to make it, I need to assemble a party, especially because of the dangers that lurk to the east, which probably means learning a bunch of languages as I go. Fortunately, I don't think they have the absolutely unfounded assumption that all fox people are automatically thieves. Anyway, the first trip is to travel to the exotic shores of the Kælia Mihekom. I'll probably hitch a ride on a cargo ship, as that's pretty much the only way over there. Alright, after sailing for a while, I made it to the Kælia Mihekom. This capital town is called it's such a nice tropical area, and there's some really interesting history here. Most of the population is elves and humans, though there's some halflings about. There's only one problem. The language is a bit difficult. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to find plenty of documentation. So without further ado, here's an explanation of the lepetino a yakai malu yotatai mokali. This language has a very simple phonology. There's only 5 vowels, a, e, o, and u, with a long short vowel distinction. The diphthongs are I, oi, ao, and eu. The consonants are just as easy. There's a simple set of 9 consonants: ma, na, ba, da, ka, a, ha, wa, and la. There are word initial continuant allophones of the pa, da, ka stops, which are f, s, and ya. A can only be used in between vowels. So the phonotactics are just as simple. The only type of syllable is CV, or just V. This makes it very similar to languages like Old Alestian. And the script is very simple. It just has 50 characters with long vowels indicated by this underbar and this special joiner character for compound words. That brings us on to gender. So there's 3 genders in the language: masculine, feminine, and neuter. Feminine nouns end in e or e, masculine in a or o, and neuter nouns end in u. Gender is only relevant regarding articles in this language, and these are the types of articles. So they differ from masculine, feminine, and neuter, and for number, singular and plural. There is a basic distinction between definite, indefinite, like the and a, and this proximal and distal, which just means like this and that. Okay, so if you've been looking at these words and thought, those sure are some long words, then you're technically wrong. There are 2 classes of words in this language. These are short words, but most in the language are long words or compound words. Whenever 2 words are combined, the resulting long word has the gender of both nouns, specifically in the order they come in. If one of those nouns forming the compound is not a noun, it takes the latent gender of the word, which is indicated by the word's final vowel. For example, sitikini to etai ka kami means serpent, and is neuter, feminine, gendered, and would take mo. Now you might be thinking, it sure would take a long time to talk in this language. Yeah, you'd be right. Alright, so onto the verbs. The verbs are pretty simple. They can't inflect, and instead they take auxiliaries to show their tense and aspect. Most verbs can be reduplicated, so the reduplicated form has something to do with the resultative state after the verb is completed. For example, alu ka'amaini means to meet, while alu ka'amaini means to be friends. The pronouns are fairly simple, rather in line with the gender system of the language. Note the vowels do not follow the gender patterns. Okay, this language has a taboo. Long ago, the name of the goddess Akikakanako could never be fully uttered in the language, and a speaker would have immediately stopped speaking after the 3rd velar stop. This developed into a grammatical rule covering the whole language that any speaker uttering 3 velar stops will immediately stop, pause briefly, and continue with a new sentence or even a single word. This gives the otherwise simplistic language a really jumbled structure. So, it's not too bad, just a bit long. Anyway, traveling across the country is dangerous, so I'm going to find a fellow party member to join me in this tavern. Foithiqøi luka amaini hioi mawe, fowa soke fale, fowa maki li taika, fowa aki nalake ihitoi melewa lali'i fowa hahamisi uwelaipa'a. Sewala itakamana nakamele no fale, Italaka
Sewala leme to namonomonomu fale.
Maina tai foa I ta kamanuma naka mele no fale. I teleko foa leme to namonomonomu fale oto. Hakenu to kai yato foa fale.
Wow! Foa wa lime I leme to enemy fale. Watele so kini ni sai kai nai I leli?
Ma foanaka kamaki. Mita litaina fonumel paleponuma salili mu simesi ti kikoka. Sewala mo mamaki watele sokini ni eleto soloke. Sewala soloke aiti toloke aiti ono yato?
Ahu! Hakanutaka. Sewala foa soloke aiti toloke? Lumak. Sewala foa soloke aiti toloke. Eta kale felitimaku namonomonumo aiki mo ale. Itelekaini yato fele.
Lumaku sai kai nai I wa kanela hanaku fale ipiku foa
Yato afoa hawe leni ka lemeto nai wa o miti peketiti lali I sa te ke koga o apio.
So, we're finally in the Ooïooqho Neskha, which they call Foithiqøi, and we're in the city called Ooïooqho. There's a lot of dwarves, humans, and even the odd dragonborn about here. This place is really daunting, not just because of how many weapons people just wield about. The language is, well, I may as well explain it to you. Alright, this language has only 6 consonants. Pa, ta, ka, fa, sa, and ha. The labial consonants can only be at the start of a word. That's not a lot of consonants. Well, the vowels... I, U, E, U, E, A, U, E, U, A, U, O, I, U, E, U, I, O, A, E, O, I, Oi, Ui, R, A, I, O, Ui, R, I, E, O, U, R, I, R, I, L, I, O, U, R. Word order is dictated by animacy hierarchy. When two nouns have the same animacy, they're ordered by how physically close they are to the speaker. Verbs always directly follow the subject noun. This language has 6 genders, all of which correspond to declension and animacy level. Human, demi-human, weapon, animal, neuter, and unseen. It looks like the initial speaker base was probably human. Anyway, the human declension is pretty straightforward. As you can see, there are 8 cases in the language: nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, ablative, locative, and abessive. Some suffixes cause a bit of root mutation, but nothing too bad. Note that they decline for case as well as number, singular, paucal, and plural. The demi-human declension is quite similar, nothing special here, just a few different thematic vowels. Very often the only difference between words of different declensions is the suffix. The animal declension requires that case particles precede the noun in addition to the declensions shown here. The case particles also have a few other uses, as you'll see soon. The non-living declension has no nominative or vocative case, and non-living nouns can never be the subject of a sentence. The last one is the unseen declension. While all the other genders relate to some characteristic of the thing they describe, nouns assume the unseen gender in declension when they have not personally been seen by the speaker. Oh yeah, you might have noticed I skipped the weapon declension. Here's the weapon declension. Remember how I told you what the cases in the language were? Yeah, well, the weapons have different cases. So here they are. Nominative, accusative, vocative, possessed, instrumental, equative, ornative, and causal. They can't take case particles. I'll take a moment to explain the weapon gender in declension. It started out that basically the speakers of this language held weapons in extremely high regard, and later on the weapon declension got extended to include even stuff like soldiers, tools, and craftsmen. They like weapons so much, their entire writing system is just weapons, with each weapon standing for one vowel, and these small shield diacritics being optional indicators of preceding consonants. They also have a subscript nasal marker, and diphthongs stack multiple weapons together from the bottom up. Verbs agree with the subject in gender and in number for human and demi-human subjects. Note that while nouns possess the three numbers singular, paucal, and plural, verbs instead have singular, dual, and plural. Also note that there's no imperfective-perfective distinction, only past and non-past. The second conjugation adds a bit of a strange feature, taking Ooïooqho, which means to run. Note that the octal form is handily identical to the weapon animal form. The third conjugation adds a future tense. Okay, so you probably noticed that there's a non-living unseen form here. Now before you yell at me complaining how I said earlier that the non-living and unseen nouns can never be the subject of a sentence, that's still true. That's because third conjugation verbs agree with the object of the sentence instead of the subject. There's also this third second verb conjugation thing too, found in the verb poinsa, which means to kill. These verbs additionally require all nouns in the same clause to take a case particle, even if they didn't need one. Okay, so then there's the fourth conjugation. I mean, it speaks for itself, really. And here's the verb to be. It's pretty suppletive. So there are no pronouns in this language. Certain identifying words like the ones for person can be used, but often speakers are awkwardly forced to use names. Now time to get to the second piece of the puzzle. It looks like the speakers of XIÐIO, when they made it to the land of Foithiqøi, were made a subservient lower class and had to learn their master's language. But they kept on speaking their old language and sort of blended the two. This apparently solved LYY's awkward Wheeler stop issue. What a nice manageable solution. Code switching really is an uncomplicated and straightforward thing. Uter ahasua, ulcer fo usa ahasua hahon ha, on, osun fasayu, o enlisun fasayu, fu. Fasayu enlisun, akui fu fiasaisi. Ulcer urkaya fotuse. Enliar urhai ikantin fotuse. Enliar fasaisi oer. Akui u enlisun kote tatuhuewa o untaeti. Eokun utahaye. Eokun aihaya eke tatatakum. Mekepekatatata emukuna haha miti o beloipa. Uter. Watawelu kaa maini. Finally, we've arrived in the orcish lands of Ethelveth. Just listening to their languages doesn't sound too bad, though they are aggressive folk. Really, the language is, at a glance, consistent, concise, and really functional. I'll study up on it and then explain the language. Okay, so there's a simple sound inventory with no long vowels and a basic 5-vowel system. I, U, E, O, A, and the two diphthongs I and Ao. There's also a simple consonant inventory.
Note that voiceless fricatives are written with double consonants. This is because there used to be a geminated-ungeminated distinction found in these sounds, which developed over time into a voiceless voice distinction. The reason they're still written like that will become apparent soon. So we've got ma, na, pa, ba, ta, da, ka, ga, fa, va, tha, the, sa, za, ha, wa, ra, la, ya. And there's some consonant mutation depending on if there's a front vowel in the same syllable. So they'll become na, na, tva, dva, cha, ja, a, la, sha, ja, tha, the, tsa, ja, hya, ya, a, sha. Also note that the Etruscan alphabet is used to write this language. As the letters are almost all visually similar to the Aklahar alphabet equivalents, I decided to keep their native method of writing. Nouns have cases which are marked with a suffix or postposition. Looks like there's these. Okay, so these special phonemes are never actually written, but I found these symbols in some of the grammars. They're never used in root words and basically just grammatical features. The regressive negative phoneme deletes the sound before it, while the progressive negative phoneme deletes the sound following it. There are a few verb forms, and these are completely regular across all verbs in the language. In addition to the tense mood aspect shown here, there are agreement suffixes where the verb agrees with the subject in number and person. And the suffixes are not attached to the verb, but onto the word 2 words before the verb. Well, it's kind of manageable within this language, so, you know, it's not too bad. The other 2 languages I've explained hardly use numbers at all. However, Eth, being a language of trade and commerce, developed as a very complex system for counting. It pairs counters with numerals like Japanese, and depending on what you're counting, you use one of 2 number systems. One is base 10, one is base 9. So 10 gold pieces would be partas iji, and 10 people would be ich or oin. All of the plural pronouns, of course, contain the plural prefix which all nouns have. I've mentioned that this script uses the Etruscan alphabet. Well, that's not quite true. They use a script based on the Etruscan alphabet. It's not as bad as it looks. There's still only 20 letters, but they do have variant letter forms. Basically, there are these letters, and when preceded by one of these, they take the letter form in the box. Like, for example, the word we've been writing as this should probably be written like this. Anyway, I've recently learned that the speakers of XIÐIO went through this area too, and it says that that can't be right, learned Eth as well and speak it. They can't possibly speak 3 languages at once. That would be completely unmanageable. Alright, so to survive these lands, we're gonna need a dwarf on our party, and it looks like, just our luck, there's a dwarf barbarian at the bar. Fan berudu. Guntados evon kan shidvi natayarut sainda o evisundo fshe evisum uham ahia aroz fshe mara vidkir uhait Tnuham banad ojiche mats one an mats natayirut gov. Ga, bom. Uhamis janin istadu. Dova, aqij echli. Is ich paiche raidan gobo vo. So this is it. The final destination. Uh-oh. So after getting here, I was really confused by their language. It looked like it was just a jumble of the 3 languages I had learned on my journey, and I was right. The speakers of XIÐIO began as a break-off group from Lalepetino a Yakai Malu Yotatai Mokali. Remember that Wheeler-Strop constraint from earlier? They solved it by code switching into their higher-ups language. But to avoid their higher-ups understanding their conversations, they would code switch back to Lalepetino a Yakai Malu Yotatai Mokali whenever they mentioned one of the revered weapon-gendered words, as their higher-ups were usually soldiers and thus would take the weapon gender. From there, they moved to Ethelveth and mixed that language in as well and finally settled where they live now. But they started incorporating grammatical code switches and other processes like code blurring into their amalgam language. So, Here's an explanation of XIÐIO. Okay, so there are 4 important processes here: code switching, code interpolation, code fading, and code blurring. Code switching is where you switch from one language to another immediately, like normal. Code interpolation is where you overlap your switching sentences by swapping the order of the last word in the first language and the first of the second. It's not very common, used only in a few cases. Then there's code fading, where you take the last phrase or word of the leading language and you mix it with the first phrase of the following language. So beginning with the first phoneme of the following language and then the first phoneme of the leading language and so on. All right, so that brings us to the word and. There is no word and in this language. Instead of the conjunction, they bind the 2 words, clauses, phrases, or sentences together using code blurring. Combined vowels are conservative and keep features present on only one of the combining phonemes. A diphthong combining with a monophthong duplicates the monophthong and overlays it over every individual component of the diphthong. Consonants maintain their integrity with vowels modifying them, with the exception of LYYs, which makes the vowel really growly. Fortunately, consonants are pretty simple. In case of an intersection of 2 consonants, you just use this chart. For example, the intersection of the sound t and z is ts. Negative phonemes are copies of the phonemes they combine with, except for the property the next or previous phoneme is silent. Well, that just about does it. Oh, yeah, I was told to look out for this goblin lord who's apparently really evil and tries to kill adventurers like us. So, he might, He's behind me, isn't he? Luma kimiti pakiti ipiku arroz oich. Ogonog do ewo. Ahyafe foa elito yanaukiku. Foa yanaukiku. Ufoa matakai. Ioi sake. Uir. Henya. Bonodara. Oa sirio kaep. Anse hun sewolo yo tata imikali. Yato oluli mei. Hakenu toka lulumu hahamiti. Yoto tai moka ewa ahasu se maseradit. Akahake. Itelaka olieni mi a lemeleme to luli mel I mo sitikini to etai ka u esaton. Vi zo na putlak lo spelfs u shko namu u bakur satnre ni fulani inu hle chgukt dnie eka u par likthit. Momono ande fe ipiku foa. Moma tamaki su fo take pute I hitf isu hasun irjin adich. Otar ij nefsh hir irji zo halijdvi moma tamaki so malahuini hisu no takata lulumu naiwonaka vasin pai tursa otase irje. Zo guvu wa soami niti malahuini hi su no takata amike au lulumu yu yahale waluiki a. Feitan vbtar. Hitvi ivu jedvar irjin dvidvi. Eztar atfer infma uatf. Pai turfi utehu upere sauteha. Liwers leint was auras le ikautiti kinito uwainomini.